And I'm going to bring us back to this end of the table for a moment. When I was in training, I trained in endocrinology and in geriatrics, and I created a women's health fellowship and came to Washington, D.C. to try to help us move our country forward, moving more from a reproductive, what I would call bikini model of medicine, into a more comprehensive, holistic approach. And during the years that I was at HHS, we created many centers of excellence around the United States, helped to work with research groups so that the research that we were developing and designing was more inclusive. And it was really trying to evolve where we had viewed women's health to be a more comprehensive picture. During that time, I also had the privilege to begin working with NASA, first as an astronaut finalist and then as their medical advisor, initially for women's health, and then it branched into really sex and gender-based healthcare, because 25% of our astronaut corps are women, so you have 75% you also have to handle. And what was amazing for me was that when you began to look how the body adapts to space, you see that the adaptation is very acute and very dramatic, so you can discern fine differences very quickly. So it was a beautiful platform to not only study accelerated aging, but also to study this burgeoning field of sex and gender-based medicine. I'm not going to go into a whole background about sex and gender medicine because we're going to have that in a few minutes. But I just want to say it opened up a box of tools that I think none of us really fully appreciated where we could go and how to change the lives of men and women around the world and as we travel beyond our Earth. I had the privilege also this past year to begin working with the White House, and I had a one-year appointment. And while I was there, two important things happened. One, the president announced a precision medicine initiative, which was really exciting. I think all of us have thought about it. Some of you have even used precision medicine either in the delivery of care or as a patient. And also there was a focus on innovation and technology. And I know we use those buzzwords all the time, but actually trying to foster innovation and technology so everybody would own it, rather from whether you were a child in school or to an entrepreneur or an educator, really bringing everyone to the table. And they did it through various tools such as symposia, summits, innovation prizes. And it got me thinking of what would I want to create having the pedestal that I had. And I began to think about sex and gender medicine as a wonderful catchment to be able to embrace everything that I was passionate about. So I did an informal survey, and it was a very informal survey, just asking around the U.S. and internationally, what are we doing in regard to technology and innovation? And prior to the start of our roundtable today, we talked about how the U.S. had been very much a leader, but it seems that a lot of other countries have taken the ball and have literally run for the field goal touchdown. So I thought this could be a very interesting area. I also wanted to assess not only what we were doing in healthcare, but in all aspects of our lives. Transportation, information technology, as well as what I call fourth space or retail space, which could be shoes and performance equipment and tools and hardware, and I'll go into more detail about that. And not surprisingly, I found that the health sector was leaps and bounds ahead of many of these other sectors, and I thought, well, this is interesting. What if we developed a program called the iGIANT, which stands for the Impact of Gender and Sex on Innovation and Novel Technologies. Again, if you come from NASA, you always have to have an acronym. But what was amazing is that came quickly. It just very quickly made sense. And the purpose of the program was to foster the translation of research into a sex and gender-specific design element. And that would be the outcome. So what is a design element? An element could be a policy, such as how do you include men and women in trials, whether you're at the R&D bench in government or in industry. It could be an actual product. A product could be a shoe. It could be a device. It could be a pharmaceutical. It could be a golf club, as I saw in Charlene's car. It could be anything that we use. It could be a program such as educational outreach, which you were engaged in this week to change the medical school curriculum so that all our students are aware. Or it could be the curriculum of engineers or designers. And it could also be a protocol. What are you doing at the bedside? What are you doing at your R&D factory? How are you actually implementing what you need to do? What procedures are in place? How do you change your study criteria so that you can get more people engaged? So protocol, action item. I thought it was important that we have this program owned by everybody. I had the opportunity to launch it at the White House, and as you all know, once administrations go, programs go. So for example, NASA planned for many years to go to the moon. And then when President Obama came on board, he said, now let's go to Mars. So you kind of retrofit what you're doing so that you can then go to Mars, basically on the same budget that you're going to go to the moon. It's challenging. And it's going to happen again. We know in 16 months it's going to happen again. So I thought, it's a great platform to leverage partnerships, but bring it out to the community. Let everybody own it. So I wanted stakeholders to be those in government, certainly our agencies, whether you like them or not, you got to work with them. The other, whether it's the FAA or FDA or whatever agency you're interacting with. I also thought it was important to have academia. We need that partnership. I also thought it was important to have industry, the backbone of what we do in regard to innovation and technology. And then the fourth area was our NGO advocacy professional society community. Very, very important, including the community. And then you may ask, well, what are the sectors? And I briefly mentioned them to you, and I just want to go into a little bit more detail, because you're probably trying to figure out, why am I here? And I hope by the end of this it will make sense. This week I had an opportunity to attend the American Society for Reproductive Medicine in Baltimore. Fortunately, it was the same time as the Mayo Clinic meeting. And the opening keynote was by Dr. David Page, who's a geneticist at the Whitehead Institute at MIT. And he was talking about the evolution of the Y chromosome. Have you ever thought about the evolution of your Y chromosome? It was a brilliant presentation. And what I loved is he had props. I've never been to a medical conference meeting where somebody actually had props. And he had this beautiful Y chromosome. And he was showing how it broke and how it bended and I thought, that is really clever. So this is my first foray. I don't know if it will work. Last night I was using my fancy doctor bag and a Ziploc, like trying to gather everything in my house that I could use that could be a visual. And by the way, in regard to sex differences, we've learned that men are visual. That's how they tend to learn. Hearing tends to decrease as you age. For men, it tends to be in the decibel range of women's voices. This is true. Again, it's an evolutionary viewpoint for this, so we can all survive. And then, as I learned from Dr. Page, we always state that we're all 99.9% related to each other, and so that that 0.1% is so valuable for evolution and to be able to live and grow. And then he stated that a woman is 98.5% related to her male counterpart, which is the same relationship that you have to a rhesus monkey. It's really clever. So it shows that there are these basic sex differences, but yet there's more that unites us than divides. Very briefly, I'll give you a definition that I've used for the program. Allison will probably give you a slightly modified version. We have many different versions because these definitions are evolving. But I just want us, for the sake of this meeting, to think about sex as really what is considered male-female from a basic chromosomal, basic genetic level. Gender tends to be more your psychosocial construct of how you view yourself as male or female. What complicates it is the world of epigenetics, how we interact with our environment. So I don't see it really as black or white. I see it more as a circular definition. Every group has their own variation of it. I'm taking it more from the Institute of Medicine definition, but other groups have slight variations. But that can be just sort of a starting point for us. So let's just briefly for a moment talk about why I thought health would be important. And I want to just backtrack for a minute. What does this program consist of? What does the iGIANT program consist of? It consists of a series of roundtables across the U.S., and actually Europe is interested as well. It consists of a couple of national summits where we bring together the various sectors to talk to each other, to cross-pollinate. It will consist of a series of innovation prizes. We all know from the time we're little ones that we like to compete. And I was talking to NASA this week about, well, what kind of innovation prize could come from there? And we thought, well, maybe a tour of Johnson Space Center. Things, we all have different things that we enjoy. It doesn't have to be huge monetary prizes, but it can be something of value to the individual. And I thought, okay, that's a great start for a program. So let's look at the sectors we're going to engage. Health, IT, transportation, and retail. And let me try to demonstrate what I mean. Any of you ever taken a non-steroidal? Yeah? Aspirin? Did you know that the effects may be different in men and women? There's some research that has shown that women respond perhaps better to kappa opiates versus non-steroidals, and Allison will probably go into a little bit more detail of how our bodies are wired differently to respond to medications differently. There is a common medication that I used to prescribe a lot in my medical practice, which was digitalis, foxglove, for people who were in congestive heart failure. Well, from my mentor at Yale, Harlan Krumholz, he found that it was more actually toxic in women. Aspirin, we give aspirin out all the time. You probably have aspirin in your pockets. But we see there are different effects for protection of heart disease and stroke in men and women, and we'll get a little bit more of an overview. So we know that is definitely clear, and we're really looking at precision medicine so we can basically tailor care to the individual. Devices, that's a whole other area, and perhaps Stephen can go into that, what you found in some of your work looking at that. What I wanted to do is I launched the program at HHS in July with the health sector because I felt many of the individuals in that program could then serve as ambassadors to go to other roundtables to provide assistance and guidance and expertise. And the good news is that as each individual goes through a roundtable, you've all become ambassadors. So you may be all invited to the next roundtables to talk about your respective sectors in the various roundtables you will go to. 2 weeks ago, Stanford hosted the Information Technology Roundtable. Any of you have one of these devices that we're like prisoners of? Imagine the world without them. It's interesting because we know men and women interface with technology differently. We visualize, we see the world differently, but also our tactile sensation, what we feel, is different. Women tend to have more increased tactile sensations, so if you think you're pushing on a keyboard, and one that's virtual, you may not be getting it. Have any of you ever tried to hit your phone when you have gloves on when it's cold? What happens? Nothing. Oh, heck of a lot, yeah. And we found in some women, again, more anecdotal, that they think they're hitting the keyboard, and they probably are, but just it's not registering. It's not registering what the keyboard is sensing. Also, women who have low red blood cell counts, electrical capacitance is decreased, and they also not registering this. Stanford brought together leaders in the Silicon Valley world to talk about how men and women respond to technology. Very interesting. I'm looking forward to their posting of their findings. So we know as we interface in technology, we have to take into account sex and gender, and also what we feel comfortable using. You may talk about the elderly. Do older patients feel comfortable using smart devices? And if not, why? We're tailoring technology to that part of the population, to that human factor. We also need to think about it for sex and gender. Another, of course, important area, and why we're here in Detroit, the birthplace of the automotive industry, is transportation. And what we've heard as we've gone around the table, we're talking about vehicles, cars, we're talking about the aviation world, we're talking about our own feet, the most basic of how we move from point A to B, transportation. The National Highway Safety Transportation Board put out a study in the American Journal of Public Health in 2011 that found that when women were in accidents, they were about 50% more likely to have more significant injury. And some of you may say, yeah, airbags hitting you hard, that's possible. We know the design of cockpits have to take into account different body sizes and weights. But we're also seeing, because of our own basic body weight and strength, our neck strength is different in women, and it may not position properly against a headrest, so there may be more neck injuries. They also found more foot injuries, perhaps because of the shoes we're wearing, and not have the same protection if they're in a vehicle accident where it's head-on. And this is something we can talk about. We've all talked about seatbelt design if you're pregnant or if you have other conditions, and that may come into play as well. And certainly from the aviation world, we're very interested in what changes are we experiencing, what we need to think about. And then in the other end of it, have any of you ever worn a shoe that just didn't properly fit? Any of you? Really? Probably everyone in this room. Yeah. So, we go from the car world and design. Well, let's go to our feet. And this is actually my ACE wrap that I had the joy of wearing from August and September. And it was around my foot because I tore ligaments in my foot. I did a climbing trip in the Great Smoky Mountains at the end of July, right after I saw you. We hiked in 30 miles, we climbed up and down thousands of feet. Just very quickly, we got caught in a storm our first night, and as I was walking up the mountain, I was telling my friends, I love my hiking boots. I've been all over the world with these boots. They've gotten me on the Great Wall of China, down to Patagonia, Antarctica. They're my favorite boots, everywhere around the planet. And then this massive storm comes, and we needed to get off the mountain. We're thousands of feet up, and we were on a cliff, and the rocks formed a little ravine. And so it was a 4,000-foot drop-off, or you had this little ravine with about a foot of water. So you had to walk in a foot of water, hoping the stones weren't too slippery, and praying that my boots, didn't slip. Well, little did I know is that it had eroded the soles of my shoes. So I can talk to my designers here. And about halfway down, I'm noticing the sole of my shoe floating down the ravine. So I caught it, cut off a bungee cord from the backpack, wrapped it around. I felt like MacGyver here, wrapped it around my foot. And now of course I'm putting extra effort on this left foot to be able to get down the mountain, and realizing my other fear was meeting bears at the end of it because it's now dark. And sure enough, I get off the mountain, there's a bear. So this is my first day here in the Great Smokies. Can I go home now?
You have all your experiences.
Really, this is supposed to be relaxation. Come from DC, and I've got a bear. And so we realized we had to get out of the park the next morning because I needed a boot because everything got moldy and I couldn't live on a boot with a wrap around it. So I went to a pretty well-known sporting store, and I said, I really want a boot designed for my foot. And as a woman, that's very important to me. I want the biomechanics to be right. This is high-performance activity, and I was thinking more about safety, not slipping off a mountain. And they assured me, and so everybody on the team got the same boots, and the guys got the quote-unquote male boot, and I got the female boot. I noticed the color was a little different. I had more navy and chartreuse, and I wanted green and brown, but I got the navy chartreuse. And it was a little uncomfortable. I had some blisters. I figured it's okay, you're breaking in a boot, we're doing intense stuff. And I got through it fine, very happy to come home. And I was walking, I just came into NASA. I was wearing a little bit of a high heel sandal. Again, this is first week in August. And I went to step down, and it was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. You know that noise, that little popping noise, and now you can't walk anymore? So I took the shoe off, hobbled over to the chief medical officer, asking, where are the ACE wraps? And basically stayed in my office till 9 o'clock that night with my foot elevated because I couldn't walk to the elevator, and I was too embarrassed to call an ambulance. So I knew I had done serious injury, and I did. I tore the ligaments, and for 2 months, basically off my foot, resting on it, and now I'm happy to say it's my first day wearing heels again. So I'm very excited, but we'll see. Although I'm in good company with docs in case I don't make it out here. And I have my ballet slippers in my purse. But here, something so basic, and what I learned was that there wasn't a design for a sex-specific design for the way my body ambulates, the way my foot moves. And that, potentially, I was very lucky I didn't go off the mountain. I just tore ligaments when I came back. So we all probably have stories, and I have these 3D glasses. Any of you see the movie Everest? Do highly recommend seeing it, and they give you 3D glasses. But I want us to, after this roundtable, begin to look at the world through a new lens, a really four-dimensional lens, to see what we can do in our respective worlds to get our colleagues, our family members, our peers, everyone you meet, to talk about sex and gender. And you think I'm kidding about that. I'm just going to end this one quick story. I'm on the plane coming to Detroit today. I noticed the woman to the right of me, Tony. She's got wrist splints, and I asked her, do you have carpal tunnel? And she said, no. I have arthritis in my thumbs, and I went to my orthopedic surgeon. He said, women are very most likely to get this, and I don't want surgery. That's because I use my thumbs as I work my BlackBerry, as I work my device. And I thought, see, this is perfect. And so I started talking to her about iGIANT, and it turns out her daughter is a newscaster here in Detroit. Fantastic. So I highly recommend that after today, tell everyone you can think of, people you meet on planes, trains, boats, because everyone needs to know about it. And once they start to think about it, it will change the way you see your life and everything you do in it. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Allison to give us the scientific experience of sex and gender.
I hope you could excuse me.
Thank you.
I have to go meeting. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. Thanks all of you for coming. And we appreciate the time. And very nice meeting all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.